strategy, and international partners about intelligence analysis, national security, and multinational operations. And now, here is your host, Ivan Raiklin.
All right, America. What is going on? What's shaking and baking? Today is Thursday. And another day of the Raiklin Report. Whew, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I think today's a big day, just like every other day. Before we get into it, I think we may have a brief special guest who's in the background spinning around in the chair, and he might want to make a few comments. Greg?
Yep.
You want to make a cameo appearance today on the Raiklin Report?
No, I'm fine.
No, you're fine? This is why we do it, right? Get over here. Just say hi to the crowd. You want to say anything? If not, then I'm going to focus in on the show. Okay. Don't make too many noises, okay?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And if you are, make sure you hurry up. You want to gavel in? Here, you can gavel in. Gavel in the Raiklin Report.
Order in the report.
Make a you know what a cameo appearance is?
Yeah.
I'll show you. Come here. That right there is a cameo appearance, meaning that you're in the camera frame on video live right here, and we're streaming across 8 platforms, and that's WVW TV right there. So on WVW TV, it's live, and then we post it up on Rumble later.
Okay.
And then the other ones we're live on Getter. I think we're live on Telegram also, and a bunch of other platforms.
Okay.
You want to say anything?
No.
Okay.
Just gavel in.
All right. I just gavelled in with you. Thanks. And let's start the show. All right. So today is Thursday, and looks like our courts are completely acquiescing to the cover-up of what actually happened on January 6th, based on the judge's ruling that accidentally bumping into a fence that surrounded the perimeter of the restricted zone on January 6th is considered, according to them, terrorism. Oh my gosh. Leaning over and falling over a fence. Well, if that's the case, shouldn't Ray Epps be charged with terrorism because he was the one that was literally on the front lines on the outer breach? And then what about Scaffold Commander and some of these other team members of the Ray Epps outer breach team? Shouldn't they be the ones that are also involved in this domestic terrorist charge? All it is, folks, it's just yet another cover-up to the cover-up to the cover-up. They are protecting themselves from their own lawless corruption. And we're going to continue to expose it. My Substack series will continue to expose it. And it seems as though, based on the inactions of Kevin McCarthy, I think we're going to have to readdress and remind folks that I wrote a 13-part Substack series basically doing a counterintelligence investigation into Kevin McCarthy, who is now the Speaker of the House. And we may have to readdress whether or not America wants to keep him as the Speaker of the House. The way we do that is to communicate with the 222 members of the Republican Conference. Okay? Yes. So, let's actually today, remember I said in August we're going to focus in on pushing for Nuremberg 2.0. I think yesterday I forgot to mention anything thereof. So I'm going to briefly talk about that. And then we're going to talk about something on a more positive note, because I like to stay positive. So there are hearings coming up in September. Actually, wait, today is August 31st. So yes, last day of August. There are hopefully hearings coming up in the next couple weeks when the Congress reconvenes. But over the next 2 weeks, the members of Congress are still in their home districts. And that's where you need to apply the necessary pressure on, for example, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, Wenstrup, who chairs the subcommittee on COVID Select, which is part of the Oversight Committee, which Jim Comer chairs. It would be nice if he would have hearings, basically 3 of them, back to back to back, 3 weeks in a row in September, and then hopefully into October, making the case to America that what they call the vaccine mandate was unlawful from the get-go. And so consequences need to inure. A lawyerly noise that is synonymous with there needs to be consequences that result from the actual forced, coerced consumption of the emergency use authorized products known as the DNA mutilators, the clot shots, the death jabs, the heart exploding injections, right? And all the other EUA products. So Brad Wenstrup is our first priority of who we need to convince. And then the second priority is going to be Jim Banks. Jim Banks chairs the subcommittee on personnel and readiness of the House Armed Services Committee. So it'd be nice to have, at a minimum, those 2, Jim Banks, Brad Wenstrup, hold a joint hearing and invite members of the other component of the bicameral legislative branch, such as, we talked about this before, Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Tommy Tuberville, and bring in other relevant actors from the Armed Services Committee, Weaponization Committee, Oversight Committee, COVID Select. Some come to mind. Tom Massey. In this instance, for this particular topic, Marjorie Taylor Greene comes to mind. Who else? Matt Gaetz, Dan Bishop, Mike Waltz. Who else? Eli Crane, Corey Mills, just to name a few, to have a joint bicameral hearing exposing the lawless mandate known as the vaccine mandate in order to create the necessary education for the American public that we are now moving towards what? The maximum punishment for coerced experimentation using emergency use products on the entire military. And consequences need to be such as the removal and the criminal prosecution of everybody in the military that actually coerced another person into accepting an emergency use authorized product against their will. And in the instances where somebody got injured or died from that coerced product consumption, then the appropriate respective criminal charges should be laid. At a minimum, removal from command, expulsion, loss of all benefits, and then those that were critical thinkers that held the line need to be promoted at a minimum 2 ranks. And the NDAA of 2024 needs to be renamed to the Lieutenant Promotable. So that is, Lieutenant Promotable should have been Captain. The Lieutenant Mark Bashaw Critical Thinker Service Member Reinstatement Act of 2024. And those individuals need to be frocked up 2 ranks, all that pushed back against the unlawful mandate. Okay? Now, that's that. The other topic that I want to talk about, and we might have time for yet another one, and this is where, Mr. Producer, I need to enlist your attention, and I would like to have you bring in a video clip. So last weekend, I was at the Reawaken Tour in Las Vegas, Nevada. Absolutely fantastic, amazing, massive crowds, nice cold tent where we expose more truth, and the movement of free speech, truth, and freedom is continuing to grow nationally. The next one is going to be in October, 13th and 14th. I happen to be one of the lucky few, thanks to Clay Clark, to be one of the speakers. Now, as I go into a little bit more detail, Mr. Producer, if you can go to Clay Clark's Twitter account, I think it's The Clay Clark is his Twitter account, and let's pull up that video that was just released. And I think General Flynn retweeted it just not too long ago today. And it's a very powerful music video. And I'd like to go ahead and play that for people to listen in and see that the culture narrative war is moving in our direction, in our favor, particularly ever since the criminal syndicate in Georgia, led by Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, Jordy Fuchs, those are your China First Republicans, that are providing top cover over the China First Democrats, Soros-funded DAs, and the entire ecosystem down there that are trying to do everything in their power to all they want to do is block Trump from getting on the ballot. If he just dropped out of the race, all this goes away. If he, for example, essentially, let me just say this. If he dropped out of the race, it'd be game over. None of these prosecutions would continue because that's their end state. And all they're trying to do with these different, the 90, 100, whatever, the 5 trillion indictments that they have on Trump is just to use up his resources, to weaken his campaign on other things, and also to make the case to the American public that the legislatures and the GOP needs to do everything in its power to make sure that he doesn't appear on the ballot, doing everything in their discretion and beyond to force him from securing a re-election, because there's going to be retribution of the highest order for all of these scum. Now, with that as a backdrop, Mr. Producer, could you please play that music video, and then we'll discuss it on the other end.
This is the great awakening. The great awakening. It's the great awakening. They hate when people unite, trying to take away Christ while we the people just fight. Don't matter black or white, whether left or right. I feel the Lord's about to strike like a thief in the night. Evil right in your sight, but this was home of the brave. Good men do nothing now, will be the home of the slaves. Just keep locking you down, all alone and enraged. Soldiers fought and died for this, I bet they roll in their graves. It's a spiritual war, so be on guard what your kids see. Hope the stock keeps dropping till we bankrupt Disney. Don't support if it's woke, toss it out like a frisbee. You perverted CEOs thinking nobody knows. We gotta boycott the parks, I'm hoping nobody shows. This world got real dark, can't even trust kids shows. Be on your toes, these are flows coming straight for your heart. You don't believe it's the mark, you better believe it's the start. Feels like I'm weaving through darks, this great awakening grows. Chris Sky is unrelenting. We'll never stop stating that Jesus is our King. People what keeps us laughing still exposes vaccines. Hope exposes Epstein. No, they explain what all means. Home of the play, land of the free. Freedom's only found in the arms of Jesus. This world a lot easier, man, to deceive. Jordan knows our trees, you get all of every season. The kingdom of God unite, fight for what's right, be the light. Don't put trust in man, this was never set us free. Like, where do you put your faith? Who do you believe in? Faith only promise, who never repent, run back to Jesus. The Great Awakening.
Join General Flynn and the Reawaken America Tour at timetofreeamerica.com.
All right, timetofreeamerica.com. Absolutely fantastic video. I got to give it to Clay Clark. He's been doing a couple of rap songs over the last few months that are definitely going viral. They're interesting, definitely leveraging against these scum on the left with the culture war against them. And like I said before, the entire movement to try to take out Trump is only galvanizing more and more people to ask themselves, why is the entire uniparty going after this individual in such a fashion? I mean, he's gaining street cred every day by the weaponization against him, and he's only pushing back, and pushing back particularly those that are in the Reawaken America movement. And like I said before, honored to be speaking at the next two. I'm scheduled to speak at the one in Doral, which will be hosted at Trump Doral in Miami. Well, in Doral, Florida, which is right outside of Miami, at the resort there. And then also there will be one in December in California. And the one in, I think the one in Doral is October 13th, 14th. And the one in December happens to be in whose backyard? Kevin McCarthy. We'll see. Maybe we can get him over there. That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? As he gets berated and schooled by America First citizens. And, I get it. He's a China First Republican. And so hopefully we can convert him and to repent from his China First ways and gradually move him over either to America First values, or we just vacate him. We'll see. Hopefully he's vacated by the time we do Reawaken in December in California in his backyard. All right, so thanks for that video, Mr. Producer. Let's see what else is going on. Let's take a look at the calendar to see what's coming up down the pike. September. Tomorrow's September 1st, which means it's Constitution Month. You know what I'm going to do for my theme for Constitution Month? I think it's appropriate since, September has 30 days. The Constitution has 7 articles, 27 amendments. Maybe we'll touch upon the Constitution a little bit every day of the month, considering that September 17th is Constitution Day. And on Constitution Day, I just found out earlier today that I will be definitely speaking at an event in Rhode Island. By the way, I'm getting a lot of speaking event requests now that people are starting to recognize a lot of the research and investigation and work that I've done actually are starting to come to fruition, and people are starting to recognize its value. So if you think my content is valuable, please go ahead and support at Substack, ivanraiklin.substack.com. Also, if you want to support Mike Lindell, you can do so by putting in promo code PATRIOTS. I always forget to do that. And if you want to support my work on Twitter behind the scenes, you can go to X and go ahead and subscribe. Or if you really want to support me and my investigative work into the deep state by name, date, place, time, location, each branch of government, Article 1 of the legislature as it applies to the J6 Fedsurrection coup, Article 2, which applies to the entire scumbaggery of the deep state, going back to the illegal defrauding of the FISA court, and then the spying on the Trump campaign, and then the subsequent 6 attempted coups that resulted in the temporary coup of January 6th through the illegally conducted and illegally certified election that was closed off and completed with that J6 Fedsurrection, headed up by Pence, Pelosi, Yogananda Pittman, Thomas Tobias, and then the subsequent cover-ups by the J6 Cover-Up Committee, Liz Cheney, Adam Crybaby Kinzinger, and the rest of the cabal in behind the scenes that were supported by Paul Ryan and his faux news outlet, and the rest of the scumbaggery of the House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving, the former Senate Sergeant at Arms potentially, which has now been deceased, Michael Stanger. Basically, go to my Substack if you want all the names and all the details. If you can't keep up with every name that I mentioned, I get it. I speak fast and a lot of names that you've never heard of, but I've been doing this research for years and we're continuing to expose it. And the way that I'm able to do it is through your support through Substack, the Give, Send, Go, and your support on X and Locals and all these other platforms. And if you don't want to support me, continue to consume my free work. That's fine. Keep getting educated as I educate myself on finding out all of the deep state actors. Okay. All right. So, got a few minutes left. We have time for one more topic, it looks like. So, September. Get ready, folks. We got 2 weeks to motivate Congress as we go into at a recess, the August recess. And we need to focus our efforts on the following. Let's take a look. I'm going to pull up some notes here. I think we're going to have to go back to our discussion that we had about 6 months ago. Okay. And that discussion was now, what did that memo talk about? Well, that memo was circulated amongst House Freedom Caucus members that considers alternatives to McCarthy after his midterm failure. Now, that conversation was being had in November, December, and into January before the speaker's vote. And the best that the Freedom Caucus could do was essentially create one person vacate the chair, certain demands, go back to regular order. But there were some other things that were being discussed. And in that memo, as listed and broken by the nationalfile.com, it's called Nuke Bombshell, House Freedom Caucus Memo Details Plan to Elect Donald Trump as Speaker of the House. I think we've come to the point where this discussion needs to be readdressed. Why? Because let's give Kevin McCarthy a grade on his performance over the last 7 months. And that represents 25%, almost 30% of the time that he's going to be Speaker in the 118th Congress. Let's go ahead and see how he has addressed the Chinese infiltration of U.S. government, commerce, industry, and defense. How well has he done? You answer that question for yourself as I go through some of these. Number two, how has he done it as it relates to creating a committee or conducting a serious investigation into the November 3rd illegal election operation of 2020? What has he done as it relates to the pervasive infringement of our First Amendment rights to free speech? Yes, Jim Jordan has done hearings, the weaponization hearings, but what exactly has Kevin McCarthy done to stop that from happening by Facebook and CommieTube? By the way, these are companies in California, in his backyard. What has he done? What about number four? Has he launched a Nuremberg 2.0 style military tribunal to hold these scum accountable for the millions of deaths during Mike Pence's and Jared Kushner's COVID task force and the aftermath with the Pfizer fallout and the Moderna mutilation? To name a few things. What has he done? What about Congress's role in investigating the truth behind January 6th? And what about the murders of Roseanne Boylan and Ashley Babbitt? Kevin McCarthy said that Michael Byrd was just doing his job. And in fact, Kevin McCarthy sat idly by and watched as Thomas Manger, Pelosi's and Schumer's Capitol Police Chief, Thomas Manger, promoted Michael Byrd last week. Meanwhile, Kevin McCarthy's just sitting back and relaxing and observing and like, oh, my little guy did his job. He got promoted for murdering Ashley Babbitt. And what has Kevin McCarthy done to expose Yogananda Pittman? Or release the 44,000 hours of tape? Or leveraging his House Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Billy McFarland, to do the same, release the 44,000 hours? Why hasn't he done that? Is it because he also is complicit in providing time? The Yogananda Pittmans, Tad Tobiases, and the Thomas Mangers of the world? Because by releasing the tapes, it's going to expose that there was a Fedsurrection coup beyond any and all doubt, and then that all the evidence that was provided by the J6 cover-up committee and the House and the Capitol Police as it relates to the J6 defendants, it was curated, manipulated, doctored video evidence with coerced impact statements by U.S. Capitol Police to ensure that everyone at the DOJ believed that it was a insurrection. And so that all the judges that you're hearing and seeing now in their written opinions are saying it was an insurrection of the highest order. Never before has the human race experienced such belligerent, wanton bloodshed, right? All lies and covered up by Kevin McCarthy. He is complicit. How do we resolve this? I think it's time to essentially talk to Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, Matt Rosendale, Eli Crane, Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, Bob Good, Byron Donalds, Victoria Spartz. How about all those Freedom Caucus members that know and that were discussing and floating around this idea in the first place? I think it's time, folks. The House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Why don't we do both? On one side, have Speaker Trump. On the second side, immediate impeachment. And while the evidence is being showcased for the whole world to see of the Biden criminal syndicate, that's when that evidence needs to be used by the states to go ahead and decertify their electors from 2020 and trigger the new Speaker of the House, Trump, to go ahead and hold a joint session vote with quorum, of which Kevin McCarthy, along with Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, did not allow. Thus, having a nice one state, one vote for a reinstatement, of Donald Trump. So I'll be pushing that over the next few weeks. Let's see how it goes. Come join me. With that Raiklin report complete.